You finally stop pleasing everyone, and you have never felt guiltier. Carl Jung does not call that guilt your conscience. He calls it withdrawal, the body dragging you back. And just ahead is a fork where healing and going cold look the same. You let the message sit there, unsoftened. You said no and did not explain it 3 times. And in place of relief, a guilt so physical, your body braces to undo it. By the end, you will know whether you are healing or just going cold. You will see what the pleasing actually was, the bargain a frightened child struck before you could name it. You will feel why setting it down trips an alarm that has nothing to do with right or wrong. You will watch the people who relied on it push back, and you will grieve in a way that quietly rewrites your history. And you will reach the fork the gentle versions always skip, where real change and plain coldness wear the same face. Pleasing everyone was a coat you put on so that no room would ever turn cold on you, and you mistook it for kindness. Setting it down can finally let you be warm on your own terms. Consider a woman. Call her 60. For as long as anyone has known her, she is the one you call when it all falls apart. The friend who arrives first and leaves last. The one who fixes what other people break. The still point that everyone else arranges their chaos around. She has one small telling habit. Whenever she finally says no to someone, she immediately drafts a softening message afterward, a little apology for the boundary, and her thumb hovers over send until the guilt wins and it goes. She has done this for 40 years and never once thought to question it. To understand the coat she has worn all that time, you have to go back to the house she learned it in. She learned to read the pressure in the rooms before her feet touched the floor in the morning, to feel which adult was carrying something heavy and how close it was to breaking. And she learned the bargain that a sensitive child in an uncertain house always learns. If she stayed easy, if she lifted the heaviness off them before they had to feel it, the room stayed warm toward her. Love arrived on one condition, that she be light to be around. Jung calls the self we build for that purpose the persona, the face we assemble to be acceptable to the people we cannot afford to lose. Hers became a particular kind, the helper and the good one, the person who needs nothing and notices everything and quietly carries whatever the room cannot hold. It was never a lie, and it was never weakness. It was the most intelligent move available to a child who could not afford to be a burden. There is a harder truth underneath it, one the comforting versions leave alone, and Jung points straight at it. A person who becomes their own flawless role does not actually dissolve their disturbance. They pass it, quietly, to whoever stands closest, who then carries it in the body as a genuine affliction. The saint stays serene because someone nearby is paying the bill in their own nervous system. You are often both people at once, the one who absorbed the whole room and the one who paid for it afterward in the chest, in the throat, in the hours you lay awake running everyone else's day back through your own body. You know that cost without needing it explained. The leaden exhaustion that settles behind your ribs after an evening of smoothing over other people's tension. The sense of being wrung out by a gathering at which nothing visibly happened. You have always called that generosity, the natural tax on a caring person. It was the price of being the place the room emptied itself into, the quiet landfill for feelings no one else would carry. That is what the code is. Every mood that needed holding, every disappointment that needed smoothing, every silence you rushed to fill, you took it onto your own shoulders so the room would stay warm. And to make space for all of it, you had to fold away your own things, your own no, your own anger, your own wanting. Each one pressed down into the dark to keep you light and easy to be around. You have worn the coat so long, layer over layer over layer, that you can no longer feel which weight under there was ever actually yours. Your empathy was never the simple gift they told you it was. So the alienation you are starting to feel now is the first stirring of a self that has been pinned under all that wool for decades, finally beginning to move. A coat you put on at 6 becomes a cage at 60, and on the day you first try to set one down, your own body will fight you for it. What meets you first when you set the coat down is alarm, not the freedom you were promised. A wave of guilt so immediate and so physical that you will swear you have done something wrong, and your whole body organizes itself around taking the boundary back before the feeling can even be named. This is the moment to read correctly, because almost everything downstream depends on it. Pleasing kept you safe so reliably for so long that your nervous system filed it under survival. It never learned that compliance was kind. It learned that compliance was how you stayed wanted, and that being wanted was how a sensitive child stayed safe. So when you stop, the body does not register a healthy decision. It registers a threat to your life, and it floods you on that scale. What that guilt actually is then is the sound of an old contract, collecting on a debt you did not know was still open. Your conscience has very little to do with it. The woman meets the alarm the first time she lets her grown son sit inside a problem he made for himself, instead of quietly solving it for him. Within the hour, her hands are reaching for the phone, the softening message half written, the apology for her own boundary already forming on the screen. Her body is certain that if she does not send it, something terrible will follow, that he will withdraw, that the warmth will leave the room and never return. None of it is reasoning. It is the contract, calling in its debt with the full weight of 40 years behind it. It comes through the body in ways you can almost predict once you know to watch for them. The throat that tightens around the word no. The stomach that drops when a text goes unanswered for an hour. The sudden urgent certainty that you must explain yourself, must give 3 reasons, must make the refusal soft enough that no one could possibly be hurt by it. Each of those is the same alarm wearing a different costume, and each one is asking you for the same thing, to pick the coat back up and put it on. The cruelty of this stage is that the people around you, and sometimes the very books you reach for, will agree with the alarm. They will tell you the guilt means you went too far, so you send the message. You take the coat back up. The relief floods in, real and immediate, and the cage closes again so gently that you can almost mistake it for home. But notice what that relief quietly costs. Every time you answer the alarm by taking the coat back, you teach the alarm that it was right to fire, and you make the next refusal harder instead of easier. The body only learns that a boundary is survivable by being permitted once to survive it. There is no gentle version where the guilt waits politely until you are already strong. It comes first, at full volume, while you are still weak, and the whole of the work is to let it move through you without obeying it. So the internal alarm is the first cost of coming back. The second one does not come from inside you at all. It walks in through the door, and it arrives wearing the faces of the people you love. The moment you stop carrying the coats, the people whose comfort depended on your carrying them will feel the warmth go out of the room, and a surprising number of them will move, mostly without knowing they are doing it, to put the old arrangement back exactly as it was. There is a reason this lands so precisely, and Jung names the mechanism behind it. In the closest and longest relationships, the line between where you end and the other person begins quietly dissolves. You stop being 2 separate people who negotiate and become a single system running on your self-erasure. Your steadiness settles them. Your yes absorbs their overflow. They do not experience you as a person with an edge of your own. They experience you as a fixed feature of their own lives, as unremarkable and dependable as the wiring inside the walls. So when you change, it does not feel to them like your growth. It feels like a part of their own world has stopped working. The pushback comes in a sequence you could almost set a clock by. First the soft leverage, the teasing, the small wounded jokes, the come on, this really isn't like you. Then when that fails to put you back, the hard labels arrive. You have gone cold. You have gotten selfish. You think you are better than everyone now. To someone who used your compliance as the thing that held their own life upright, Your first clean act of self-preservation does not read as a boundary. It reads as a betrayal and sometimes as an act of war. It does not stop at how they treat you in the present. It reaches into the record. You will hear, usually secondhand, that the story of who you were has quietly been rewritten. The patience you offered for years is now described as you being a pushover. The boundary you finally set is recast as cruelty. Your stepping back is painted as a cold and calculated betrayal of people who only ever loved you. This is the shadow at work, the disowned parts of them looking for somewhere to live, and your sudden refusal to absorb it makes you the obvious place to put it. Some of that resistance, though, is telling you something true, and you must not look away from it to spare your own feelings. A number of those bonds were built entirely on your having no edges, on the bottomless yes, on the certainty that you would always choose their comfort over your own. When you stop, the friction you feel is the sound of an arrangement ending that was never quite friendship. They did not love the helper, they loved the help. And a person who organized their life around your endless availability will always feel your first boundary as cruelty, because they relied completely on your never once having one. The woman gets it the way it usually comes, secondhand and gentle. A mutual friend mentions carefully that people have noticed she seems distant lately, that someone was hurt she did not call. The old machinery starts up in her instantly, the pull to draft the message, to explain, to apologize her way back into everyone's good standing. And underneath the pull, for the first time, something colder and quieter stirs, a thought that frightens her more than the guilt ever did. The thought that maybe she is simply finished with all of them. Hold on to that thought, because it is the trap, and it is still 2 movements away from being safe to touch. When the pushback finally settles, what is left is not relief but grief, and it is a stranger grief than ordinary loneliness, because it refuses to stay in the present. It reaches backward and rewrites everything behind you. What the woman discovers, in the quiet after the friends thin out, is harder than the leaving itself. Some of them did not go because they are cruel. They went because the role she played for them is simply gone, and the role was the whole of the relationship. There was never a person underneath it they were attached to. There was a function, a warmth, a reliable absorption of their worst days, and when the function closed, there was nothing left to hold them. That is the part that reaches backward. She finds herself looking at 20 years of a friendship and no longer able to tell how much of it was love and how much was access wearing the face of love. This is a specific and brutal loss, and it cuts deeper than simple solitude, because solitude at least leaves your history intact. This takes the history too. You go back through the dinners, the late phone calls, the years of being the one everyone could count on, and you cannot locate the moment any of them turned and asked what you were carrying. You walk the long corridor of everyone you ever helped, looking for one hook where somebody hung a coat for you, and there is not a single one. There is a particular memory that tends to surface here, and it is worse than the absence. It is the realization that you were often present for your own erasure and called it maturity. The times you swallowed the sharp, true observation because it would have made a fragile person uncomfortable. The opinions you sanded down, the ambitions you kept quiet, the whole bandwidth of yourself you throttled so that nobody around you would feel threatened or outshone. You did that for decades and you filed it under being a good person. The grief is seeing all at once that it was self-betrayal, and that the people who loved the smaller version never knew the larger one existed to be loved. Jung is clear about the loneliness that lives in this place. It is not the loneliness of an empty room, but the loneliness of carrying something true that the people around you cannot or will not receive. The room can be full and the phone can still ring, and you can stand inside that noise more alone than you have ever been, because the part of you that is finally awake is the exact part none of them were ever willing to meet. You have to let this grief be real, and you also have to let it end. It is the necessary darkness, the stretch where the old self and the old bonds genuinely die, and nothing has yet grown up to replace them. Rush past it, refill the room too fast with new people to please, and you will only rebuild the cage in fresh wool. Sit in it too long and let it harden, and it becomes the doorway to the most flattering mistake an awakening empath can possibly make. Because this grief, left to curdle, will offer you an exit that feels exactly like strength. And it is the trap this whole passage has been walking toward from the first minute. This is the fork, and the gentle versions of this story drive straight past it. Setting the coats down can become a genuine homecoming, or it can curdle into a new and colder defense that looks from the inside exactly like healing. The wrong turn feels wonderful, and that is precisely what makes it dangerous. After a lifetime of being buried under everyone's feelings, you discover that you can simply stop feeling them. You can look around the table and register with a clean and almost pleasant detachment that these people are shallow, that they were always using you, that you can see straight through every one of them now. The exhaustion lifts, the guilt goes quiet, and in its place rises a cool, steady sense of being finally, at last, above all of it. The empath who once could not stop feeling has become a person who feels nothing, and has decided that the numbness is wisdom. Jung has a precise name for this, and it is not awakening, it is inflation. What was meant to be taken in and integrated gets swallowed whole instead, and the ego swells up around it. You climbed down after the self you had buried and came back up having quietly decided you were rare. The reason it is nearly impossible to catch in yourself is that from the inside, it is indistinguishable from finally understanding the people around you. The tell is small and complete. When something is genuinely seen, the one doing the seeing is still somewhere in the picture. The cold turn edits itself out of every scene it judges and keeps only the verdict on everyone else. You did not in the end take the heavy coat off at all. You found a colder one, cut to look exactly like freedom. And the worst of it is that you cannot feel that you are wearing it. You can recognize the cold satisfaction of it if you are honest. The quiet pleasure of standing at a gathering and privately concluding that no one else in the room is truly awake to what is happening, that the perception is yours alone. It presents itself as discernment. It is closer to a hiding place. You use their supposed blindness to protect yourself from the harder fact, which is the loneliness waiting for you in your own quiet room, and the work still waiting there if you ever stopped looking down long enough to feel it. And the cruelest part is what the cold turn does to the very loneliness you were trying to escape. The saint was at least surrounded, even if the surrounding was hollow. The gray coat is alone by design and tells itself the solitude is the proof of its rank. Every person it writes off is one more door it quietly pulls shut, until it is sealed inside a room of its own making and calls the seal discernment. So the cold road keeps the very loneliness of the grief and simply renames it freedom, sealing it in for good. You can hear the turn in a certain kind of voice, the one that has read everything and now diagnoses everyone, that narrates other people's wounds back to them unasked, that has quietly reframed every relationship it lost as proof that the others simply could not handle its depth. The insight underneath was usually real. What it hardened into, a low fixed ceiling of contempt that no one around it is ever again allowed to rise above, is what turned a doorway into a dead end. There is a plain way to check which coat you are actually wearing, as long as you are willing to turn the question on yourself instead of on the room. Ask whether there is anyone left whose honest word about you can still land. Ask whether a single person is close enough to say, "That was fear, not insight," and have you truly hear it instead of quietly filing them away among the asleep. The cold turn removes every such person from your life one at a time and calls the empty space that results freedom. It is not freedom. It is the same hiding it always was, cut now from colder cloth. And there is a deeper irony in it, one Jung pressed on the helpers of the world most directly. The old reflex to rescue everyone was never only kindness. Part of it was a way to keep hold of the room, to spare yourself the ache of watching someone you love flounder. Going cold does not dissolve that reflex. It reverses its polarity and leaves the machine running. You no longer arrange your life around being needed. You arrange it around needing no one, which is the very same arrangement seen in a mirror. The compulsion did not end. It only changed which face it wears. The woman reaches this fork without seeing it as one. After the grief, the contempt is such a relief. It would feel so righteous to decide that every person who ever leaned on her was a parasite, to wear her solitude like a verdict handed down on all of them. It asks nothing of her. It lets her keep every wound and feel superior to it rather than sorrowful. The gray coat is already forming over her shoulders, heavier than any she shed, and she cannot feel it settling, because a coat that flatters you never feels like a coat. It feels like the plain truth about everyone else. So the question is no longer whether you can stop pleasing people. You have done that. The question is whether you can do it without trading the role of the saint for the role of the judge. And telling those two roads apart comes down to a single thing. The sign is simple, and once you have seen it, you cannot unsee it. A wall needs the other person to be a villain. A boundary does not. Watch what the two roads do with other people, because that is where each one shows its real face. The cold version, the gray coat, requires everyone outside it to be shallow or asleep or using you, because its entire sense of being free depends on that comparison. The healed version needs none of that. It can set a clear boundary with someone it still loves, still respects, still wishes well, and feel no need at all to make them wrong in order to keep itself safe. You stop carrying the coat and you let the person keep their own dignity while you do it. This is the third thing the cold version cannot imagine, because it believes the only alternative to being buried is going numb. There is another way, and it is the whole point of the passage. You do not stop feeling people. You feel them exactly as clearly as you ever did. The mood as they come through the door, the gap between what they say and what is moving underneath it, all of it intact. What changes is that the feeling stops being a command. You can register someone's pain in full and not be conscripted into fixing it. You can sense the turbulence coming off a person and decide, calmly, that it is theirs to carry. Jung points to this as the difference between being possessed by a feeling and being informed by one. The same sensitivity that once buried you becomes, on this road, a clean instrument of sight. You can watch it work in something as ordinary as meeting a stranger. You feel the familiar cold gap behind a warm smile, the small calculation running under the charm. The old you would have either rushed in to fix them or doubted the read and stayed too long just to be sure. Now you simply note it, the way you would note the hour, and let the door rest where it is. There is no campaign to expose them, no verdict handed down, no need to be proven right later. You felt it clearly, you believed yourself, and you chose your distance accordingly. It asks nothing of the other person at all. The freedom hidden inside, that is the one Jung warns the rescuers about most plainly. You are allowed to let the people you love face the consequences of their own choices. There are things a person can only learn by being permitted to fail, and the friction of that failure is sometimes the only thing that wakes them. When you rush in to soften every disappointment, you are not always saving them. Sometimes you are quietly robbing them of the struggle they needed, and sparing yourself the hard, loving discomfort of standing back and letting them have it. The woman learns the shape of this slowly, in small moments rather than one clean revelation. A friend calls in real pain late at night, and she stays on the line for an hour, fully present, feeling every bit of it. And when she sets the phone down, she does not carry it to bed with her. It was real, and it was not hers to hold until morning. Her son makes another poor decision, and she feels the old reach toward the phone, the apology, the rescue, and this time she lets her hand come to rest. She loves him enough now to let him meet his own life. The softening message stays unwritten, and for the first time, the not writing does not feel like cruelty. It feels like respect, for him and for her. So the fork resolves, and it resolves into something steadier than either being swallowed by the room or going cold above it. Which leaves only the quietest question of all. When you finally stop being everyone's coat, who is actually still standing in the room with you. So this is where it leaves you, and it is a quiet place rather than a triumphant one. When the pleasing stops, the crowd thins, and the room goes quieter than it has been in your entire adult life. For a while, that quiet is frightening, because you spent decades measuring your worth by how many people needed you standing in it. But listen to who remains once the noise dies down. The ones who stay are the ones who never needed you small. They came for the person and not the function. And while the room was full and you were busy carrying everyone, you could not always tell them apart from the rest. In the quiet, they become visible. There are fewer of them than you feared, and they are more real than you let yourself hope. And it turns out that a handful of people who can meet the whole of you is a wealth the crowd never once gave you. The solitude itself changes character too. There is an evening early on when you turn down an invitation you would once have forced yourself to accept, and you brace for the old loneliness to come. It does not come. What arrives instead is a quiet, almost physical relief, the feeling of a house holding exactly the right number of people, even on the nights when that number is 1. You stop needing the crowd to prove that you exist. Your sensitivity does not leave you in any of this. It only changes its work. For most of your life, it ran in one direction, inward, reading yourself for whatever you needed to adjust so that no one near you would be uncomfortable. Now it turns outward and settles into something closer to sight. You walk into a room and you read it cleanly. The warmth that is real and the warmth that is performed. And you no longer rush to close the gap or apologize for having noticed it. You feel everything, and you are commanded by none of it. The guilt, the old alarm that began this whole passage, does not disappear so much as lose its authority over you. It still fires now and then, out of 40 years of practice. The difference is that you no longer mistake it for a verdict. You feel it rise and move through you like an old tide, and you let it go back out, and you do not pick the coat up off the floor. The woman sits one evening with a message she has decided not to soften, the apology she will not send glowing on the screen and then going dark, and where the panic used to live, there is only a steady, sober quiet. She did not go cold. She had only at last gotten clear. You stopped pleasing everyone. You were terrified it would turn you into the very thing you had spent your whole life shielding other people from, someone hard and cold and standing above it all. It did not. You set down the coats that were never yours to carry. You grieved the rooms that only ever wanted the helper. You walked past the flattering trap of contempt without putting it on. And you kept the one thing that was always genuinely yours, the depth, while finally setting down the compulsion that came stapled to it. That is not going cold. That is the whole of you, standing in the room at last, warm on your own terms, and asking no one's permission to be there.
Empaths aren't broken. They're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com.